Welcome aboard this week's podcast of Dudes Dish Disney. Get ready for amazing attractions across America. Beer halls and bar rooms, banquets and beverages, a collection of characters and colleagues.
No cupcakes.
It's Dudes Dishing Disney. This episode of Dudes Dish Disney is sponsored by Magic Vacations. Magic Vacations. Discover the magic of travel. And now your hosts, the dudes of Dudes Dish Disney.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Dudes Dish Disney. Joining us today is our producer and resident Figgy boy, Jonathan.
What's going on? All right, I guess that's now officially happening. I thought the tech dude was sticking around, but I guess it's now going to change to Figgy boy, unfortunately.
Why do you keep changing it back to tech dude? It's Figgy boy. But we've determined this already.
Because I'm hoping you two will forget about that and let it go. But I guess not. I guess it's not happening.
No, it's not.
And I can see right. Yep, there it is. Yep, I saw that.
Yeah, because also joining us is our co-host who's dishing deeper than a Chicago deep dish pie, Ryan.
What's up, dudes? Deeper than a deep dish? That's really deep.
That's how you dish. Deeper than a deep dish. And I'm Congo Carl, former Jungle Cruise skipper, and you're not.
True.
Yeah, very true.
And we're welcoming you to another exciting episode live on YouTube. Welcome, listeners, welcome chatters, welcome followers to a fun night of Disney exploration of attractions.
Ooh. You got the mood lighting on even for this, Carl. You got like the submarine lighting going in the background.
I do.
That's just his normal basement lighting, though.
No, it's the mood lighting, John.
Sure it is.
And I'd rather be here than watching the Celtics play the Orlando Magic. Anyways.
What's basketball? We don't know what that is anymore in Chicago. I thought that was in the 90s.
Well, I thought, just because you got two New England boys here and they are playing the Orlando Magic, they're in town here in Boston. So I just thought it was appropriate to mention. Celtics are up 43-37. So I don't think Orlando has a chance.
I'm wearing the hat, boys. I'm supporting the cause tonight. I don't know if you noticed this before.
You wear that hat every night.
A little controversial.
It has zero to do with you. I'm freaking Irish, okay? It's just a hat.
But yeah, so everyone's been good, huh? You guys have been busy. I know it's seems like only last week we were together, but it's not. It's been a
2
little
weeks.
bit. Yeah,
it's been 2 weeks. Yeah, but it's nice to get to a point where we're seeing each other a little bit more often. We had a nice little stretch a couple times where it took a couple months for our schedules to align. So, for those who don't know, we're actually going to record a couple tonight after we're done going live too, and spit some out so that we keep you all entertained while we try to figure out our lives. But it's been a challenge, We're all getting older, Carl especially, and it's been a challenge with families and jokes aside. I mean, Carl, you got grandkids now too, and new gig for you, so we're all trying to figure it out. But it's nice to see you boys every couple of weeks. I miss that.
It is, and it gives us a chance to keep it fresh, So it is good to see everyone and get caught up and everything. We try to listen to our listeners and get some topics going. But sometimes we just dream up topics better than any of our listeners could.
Agreed.
And
so
there, it's one of those nights.
Experts. We're the experts, damn it.
And we are our head is full of attractions. I think, we're thinking about attractions and technology and the world of theme parks and how they've gone. I don't know, we came up with this topic. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking all the excitement that's going on at Universal and Epic and all the new technology there that we're seeing. And it's also giving us a little bit of reminiscent about when Disney put out some great new technology and how earth-shattering it was there. There's been a lot of chatter on all social media comparing breakthrough technology that Disney did, 10, 12 years ago even in some cases 20 years ago, and how other people have caught up, and that, maybe other people have gone ahead of Disney, and now Disney's going ahead of them. It's very interesting where the technology race, it's almost like a space race for attractions, right?
It is. It is. And, we're seeing the previews of Epic right now and all the things that are coming out and getting all the feedback. Meanwhile, there's, attraction videos of Imagineers working on the new Tony Stark test flight stuff for Disneyland, in the background. So Disney is very aware, like you're saying, that like, yeah, hey, there's this new stuff coming out, but don't forget us. We're still working on some stuff back there, we'll talk about that, I'm sure, too.
Yeah. I saw a great post the other day. It said, while Disney was showing those clips, Universal is opening up 4 parks around the world. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the technology itself. And, Imagineering was a term coined by, WED Enterprises and Mr. Disney himself. And that really started it all. And I think that, the leaders, and we've been looking at some timelines of when we think things really started to accelerate. And I think it's gone all over the world as far as technology and investments. You get Tokyo Land Company with big wallets. They help develop stuff in Tokyo. The original Imagineering pod is out in California. Seems like Disneyland gets some great stuff. But we were going to focus kind of on the wars in Orlando and the expulsion of these attractions here that we've seen since about 2012 or so. And you could argue, that the technology changed way before that. Some people say around 1995 when Indiana Jones came out in California, and that whole new technology and next level gen audio animatronics, the ride vehicles there were copied into Dinosaur. It was basically a carbon copy of the track. And that was, evolutionary in the 90s. But then it really got exciting in 2012 by all accounts. And when people were starting to put more theming into the queues, putting more style into what was being built, more immersion. And I think you can maybe point to the total renovation of the new Fantasyland, especially because they're talking about some of the expansions of the Magic Kingdom are going to be bigger than the new Fantasyland expansion, right? And some of the stuff that's coming as we look forward. So that kind of was, there. The Mine Train ride didn't open until 2014, but the new Fantasyland started its opening in 2012 and sort of kicks things off, right, guys?
Yeah, I mean, you've got, even though the ride isn't necessarily big or whatever, you really did see a lot of immersive theming into the Little Mermaid attraction. We don't need to go too deep in that, but I mean, animatronics in the queue was not something that was totally normal for a theme parks at that point. So that was a big change. You also had the super immersive restaurant being built with Be Our Guest Restaurant, which was and remains wildly popular with guests. I mean, the idea that you can go into 3 different rooms in Beast Castle and have a meal there that echoes what you might actually have in that, fantasy land for Be Our Guest in France. Sitting in the West Wing, is a super cool experience as long as you don't have a little kid who gets the crap scared out of him by the lightning, So maybe not necessarily in the attractions themselves, but certainly in the queues. I mean, Winnie the Pooh, the queue in Winnie the Pooh was even upgraded and changed and made to keep kids busier to stop driving mom and dad crazy, right? So, they did a really good job with starting that in that 2012 era.
Yeah, I think what happens is typical with Disney is something's a testing ground and it works. They're like, let's do more of this, right?
Sure.
And but they put the twist on it, obviously, theming being the key component. Wheels were turning in that big of a project, and I think Disney realized that, okay, we need to start refreshing. We just went through some milestones and anniversary dates, and we're coming up towards the 50th. So around 2017, I think things started really progressing. And because of the success of Fantasyland, saying, we can really take a bigger bite of the apple and go after things a whole new level. At the same time, right in that range, at the same time, Cars Land was, being developed out in California, right? And that was some new technology, some new exciting looks at thing, right? So
Radiator Springs Racers, I think, was 2012, is back in that same kind of time frame, and that immersion was totally advanced, right? That was, and still to this day, I mean, that immersion in that area is being echoed in a lot of different places, and I would argue that kind of started the war of immersive lands across the theme park world.
Yep. Now, a lot of the people are talking, okay, the catalyst for the next wave of Disney's next generation was as a result of, Islands of Adventure and Harry Potter coming to Orlando. But we know that, Disney's had alliances with IPs for a long time, and had a lot of times their planning is well before, sometimes it's longer on their drawing boards where someone else comes up with it and turns it around, pops it open, and it's open while Disney's still working on something. And so I think that's two different styles, but the real big one that kind of kicked things off, I think, for me, was seeing what they did with Pandora at Animal Kingdom, right? Because that was really the section where that was a bit of a nothing burger, right? Over in Animal Kingdom. So it was nice that where there was nothing, now there's tremendous something. They didn't do it to replace something that was already there and that could stand on its own, but they did it where there was nothing, and made something that was totally different, right? Pandora was that immersion, was that technology, and because it was a sci-fi theme too, I think it really tied in, and people were blown away by that technology, right? Doing what Disney does best sometimes, filming, but integrating that with other technology to create the illusion of flight.
Yeah, I mean, let's step back and just look at the immersion of the land, right? We want to talk about the attractions, but you're talking about two absolute legends between Joe Rohde and James Cameron coming together to put together this amazing land, right? And both guys are meticulous, like down to the absolute smallest detail. They say James Cameron, when he made Titanic, there's a scene where they're in an office and there's a desk in the office on the ship and there's a letter sitting on the office. And he gets so immersive to the point that he actually wrote and created the letter inside the envelope that was actual and real, because that's how he operates. And you'll never see what was in the inside the envelope, but to him, it had to be every single detail. So that plays into the land, which then starts playing into the attraction itself. The attraction itself now, like you said, it's that flying kind of feeling. Well, where did that come from, right? Soarin', which was super popular. And that was 12 years earlier, 17 years earlier, 2005, right? Mm-hmm. So that was 2005 when Soarin' came out. So that was another attraction that was beyond its years, that's now been emulated 12 different ways from Sunday. And it's in the Mall of America now, and it's out in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, or in that area over there now. There are different versions of it, right? And it's all over.
Those of you who don't follow Ryan, to get his picture of that was wonderful when he visited Tennessee.
So, I mean, it is everywhere, though. So now they've taken that and they said, okay, as Disney does, they're like, let's elevate, right? Like, we have this concept that works. Let's elevate. So now you've got an attraction that's got an elevated Imagineering standpoint with the genius of Joe Rohde and the genius of James Cameron. And it's just like, take that, Islands of Adventure, right? Like, I know that you're immersive. That opened, 1999? And they're like, yeah, there's some cool rides and stuff in there, but take that, right? Like, what are you going to do? That's what Disney thought was going to be a knockout blow. And we're sitting here, whatever it is, 8 years later, and that ride is still a 4-hour queue for some people, so that attraction definitely made waves and continues to make waves.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, it's just that experience alone on that ride. For the first time you get on there, just entering into the queue alone. I know we're not talking about the queues, but it drives down that ride, starting just when you take that first step into that queue. of the design, of the feel, everything into that. And then when you get on the actual ride, you feel like you've been truly transported to a different era, to a different planet. And getting on that ride vehicle and how immersive that is with the glasses, with everything that makes you feel, it feels like you are literally connecting to one of the Na'vi. It's awesome the way Disney did it. And even years now with the updates and everything they've done with it, it's like you said, Ryan, it's still sometimes a 4+ hour queue, and there's been a lot of new attractions that have come since, and that just tells you something. That really tells you that they've done something right, and they did it really well, that it was going to last the test of time many, many years later.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about that queue is they do a really good job on the outside side, making you feel as you're walking through it like you're really walking through Pandora and the waterfalls, the flowers and everything. And when you get inside, even though it's really basic and it's just concrete walls with paint, right? They make you feel like you're walking into that army base, where you're going to get connected to an avatar, right? And it's just like, it's so simple and basic, but they really thought about, let's take this basic building that's from the movie and just make it look like you're walking through that. Then you enter into the pre-show, which is really one of the more technological advances they've made for a pre-show in decades. Just in terms of like, stand on this spot and it'll light up green, and you got the video monitors playing all around you. And, it's just really, you compare that to something like Dinosaur, where, we're almost a decade after this ride was created, and that still fits. So the technology still fits. And technology moves fast, right? So 10 years later, still fitting is fine. You compare that to something like Dinosaur, and Dinosaur, like, you were in the 1990s, right? Like, you just know in that pre-show, like, yeah, okay. Where is Carmen Sandiego is kind of how I feel like. I feel like I'm a kid watching that show again when I'm going through that queue. But Avatar with Flight of Passage, like, you still feel like that's pretty legit. That's pretty up to date.
So with the success of that, on its heels, the next land that was opened over Hollywood Studios was Toy Story Land. And I got to be honest with you, I stayed away from Hollywood Studios because of the construction there and Galaxy's Edge. And I felt like there wasn't anything worth going to, for a couple of years. Let it get all done and finished, and I'll go check it out. But when Toy Story Land opened and I compare that to Pandora, I was like, wait a minute. Have they lost it? Is the technology not there? Are they not pressing forward? Because Toy Story Mania was there before Toy Story Land opened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was really, I'm like, whoa, we're going back, it reminded me a lot of, of Dinoland USA. It's like we're going back to flat rides and amusement park stuff. What's going on? But you need to step back and think about the story, right? You need to step back and see what Disney did so well is they put you in that movie for a minute in the backyard, right? And so it's appropriate, right? So it's appropriate. When you looked at that roller coaster, there was some technology in that roller coaster, as much as it looked like it was simple and not. And so you had to kind of, for me, Toy Story Land was peeling back layers of the onion to find what technology did there, because they still made it look like very simple, a backyard and full of toys, even though, technology was at play.
Yeah, the land is still super immersive, right? I mean, you have to remember, and I think we have a hard time with this as full-blown dudes, right? And maybe even some of our listeners and maybe some of the Disney adults out there that are, disappointed by some things that are happening. You got to remember when you compare, because that's what happens, right? When you compare to Universal, well, yeah, but Universal's audience is not the same as Disney's audience. Their ideal customer is not the same as the ideal customer of Disney. So Disney wants to have that multi-generational experience. So you have to have some lands that are flat rides for the kids and tamed, roller coasters for the kids. And, you look at like, what is Slinky Dog Dash? It's basically this generation's Barnstormer, right? Or this generation's, ride where it's like that kid's first roller coaster. right? Now you've got a couple of those at Disney now. You've got another one I'm sure we're going to talk about, right? But you're right. The technology is there. You've still got animatronics in that. You still got a sound system in that. You've still got a really cool ride concept and ride car in that. You've got a roller coaster that comes to a dead stop in the middle of the roller coaster and then boosts again, right? Which I don't know many roller coasters that come to a dead stop in the middle of the ride and then reboost and get you going again.
One thing, sorry to cut you off here, Ryan, but one thing to mention with that, since Slinky Dog's been designed and implemented and gone live, you're starting to see that type of element in a lot more intense roller coasters where you're almost coming to the dead stop and then an acceleration. Just in the last 4 or 5 years, there's probably about 5 or 6 roller coasters that are some of the best in the world that use that same type of element now. So it definitely caught the attention of a lot of folks with that design to create a different element, and it definitely set some standards and set some ideas. So
yeah, the jet boosters that they use to do that are tame, right? And I would give credit, at least for me, I'm not a roller coaster enthusiast, so I wouldn't pretend to know what's been done at Cedar Point or any of these other places, okay? But if we're talking just the Orlando, Universal, SeaWorld, and Disney theme parks, right? The use of that, first time I felt the use of that was on the Incredible Hulk at Islands of Adventure on the incline, right? But still, like you said, John, nothing was coming to a stop, right? And you're right. Now you've got 4 or 5 rides that do that. You've got Hagrid's, which opened in 2019, right? Which was a direct response to, some of these rides that were being opened that incorporated that as well as some other elements. But yeah, I totally agree with you. It's easy for us to look at it and be like, oh, it's a kid's ride, but there really are some technological advances and big things going on with that ride.
Now, technology really explodes a year later when Disneyland opens up Galaxy's Edge in 2019, and Disney World shortly thereafter opens their version. Exact carbon copy, as Ryan reminds me, except for one extra entrance. There's nothing different about those two West Coast, East Coast versions. Now, if you weren't put back, I think more people were astounded by the immersiveness of Galaxy's Edge than Avatar because of just a plain simple thing, the success of the movies and the franchise, right? For me, the first time I saw the Millennium Falcon, I was 16 years old. And to see it all, years later, live in front of me is something I never thought I would ever see or experience in my life, right? How can this be? You dreamed as a kid how cool that would be. You never thought back then when the movie came out, because theme parks weren't at that level of complexity, right? That someday you could ride the Millennium Falcon, let alone see it and, sitting there and the sounds and everything. And that by any means is not the headliner in Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I mean, I know you were 16, but I was 1 when Return of the Jedi came out.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
What I want to point out, though, ultimately, is that it may have been longer for me, really 6, 7, 8 years old when my brothers are getting me into Star Wars at that point. But I had the same reaction that you had, right? Which was this timeless piece that you never thought you'd get to be a part of. That now is not only in one place, it's in 2 places in the United States that you can go check it out, see it, control it. And like you guys, we've talked about this endlessly. I'm not a huge fan of Smuggler's Run, although I am excited about the news lately that there's going to be a Mandalorian and Grogu version of it. We'll come back to that. I'm not a huge fan of it, but to do it the first time and to pilot it the first time was a hair-raising experience. Absolutely a hair-raising experience. So cool. I would recommend it to anybody to do it at least once. And for that reason. And the technology in that ride itself, the way that they load you, spin it around and bring you into the next one, I mean, awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely awesome. Brilliant use of space and ride loading capacity to keep the lines moving. in an otherwise long wait, right? I mean, those rides, what is it?
Yeah.
It's probably a 7 or 8 minute attraction once you're inside of that space. So
Yeah.
and keeping you entertained in the meantime. Yeah.
One thing I'll mention too, Ryan, when it comes to like the technology and all that, even the actual video behind that, just the real-time response time to the processing of how that ride interacts with, again, with the pilot, with everything, like you do something and how it interacts. Like I know a lot of that stuff's programmed in and kind of like they do this, yada yada yada, happens, like it's all kind of programmed, but at the same point, how quickly that response time is, you need a stupid fast processor to keep up with that, because there's no lag. There's absolutely no lag when you're in that ride with something that requires that human response. And at the same point, when there's maybe not someone in a position to the system understands and responds to that so quickly and so so there's no delay, there's no lag, there's no weirdness, that it's just okay, it gets it and understands it. It's like they did it so well that you're not missing a beat. It's great.
You know, and anytime they do something that works, they look at variations for it. I want to talk about some technology that was first debuted. It was invented here, but it first debuted in France, and became very popular as a method of doing folks, immersing them. And that was the trackless vehicles of Ratatouille, right?
Mm-hmm.
Disney did it, small scale, perfected it, and said, let's do this more and more and more, right? And so Rise of the Resistance came on board with that technology. And, you know, on an attraction that's 3 or 4 times in length of what Remy was. So it was really tested the technology too, on how those batteries and the whole technology worked. Figgy Boy can tell you all about it. But my point is, when I saw Rise, there was no question in my mind to that point in time that this was their finest hour as Imagineers, right? And it quickly became, by all accolades, the best theme park ride in Orlando, because of everything that was involved. The storytelling, the length of the attraction. You really felt like you were in that attraction, not only in the queue and the 2 or 3 different pre-shows, right? But it made the attraction, longer, because that was not just a queue of distraction. You were immersed in the story, in the components of that queue, right? The transport vehicle, the loading bay just drops your jaw. Being detained in the cell, and then the actual ride itself, right? And what is it? I mean, people say, oh, it's an X amount it's a 20-minute ride and everything. When you tag all that in, it's like a 40-minute ride, right? All the components of it. What I liked about that so much, quite frankly, is many of the pavilions and attractions at Epcot, when they opened up and weren't shortened, were 30 to 40-minute rides. Universe of Energy had, 2 shows back and forth. The American Adventure still is, a 30-minute attraction. But, all the movies that were there, they cut, minutes out of those, in essences, because people were walking out of them, right? It just goes to show that if you have the right combination of technology, storytelling, and everything, that people will go through an experience for 40 minutes and not fall asleep, right? In one of the attractions, right? They keep shortening the Hall of Presidents too. In 1971, that technology was amazing, right? But no one sits through it for anymore. So I think that's all they're learning too, is that, hey, what we do best is tell stories. Let's entertain people for a long time, in that experience. The more we can get them to feel like that. Now, Olga's Cantina is just an extension of Rise, right? To me, right? The rest of the land is just an extension of that. It's like, okay, I've been through it. I'm a rebel, and now I'm chilling, So, I mean, as much as the technology is impressive, the theming is really what always does it for me.
The ingenuity is really impressive. I mean, we can talk about how it's influenced not only Disney but other places, but I think there's a couple things that we didn't even talk about with Avatar that's being talked about and seen in Flight of Passage from where we are today, like B mode, right? They learned the Yeti broke, right? The Yeti broke, and they said, "Oh shit!" Right? Like, how are we going to make sure in the future that we don't have a whole bunch of problems because we developed this? They were smart enough to know with the shaman that it's this highly intricate piece of machinery that could break. So what did they do? They built it on a thing that they could roll back, drop a screen, and go into B mode and play it so that if they needed to make repairs, you still had a good experience. That has transitioned over the years and has been adapted over the years with other attractions, namely Rise of Resistance. The animatronic at the end with Kylo Ren, they knew, right? It spins, it's got a couple of elements to it. Maybe it breaks down. What do we do so it doesn't just look stupid? They use the video screens in the background to have Kylo Ren roll around in his TIE fighter that trying to take you out, right? Like, super smart and ingenuity that has again now been taken other places, and people go, "Hey, we're building these high-end electronics." I work in electronics every day. They break down all the time. It's just the nature of the beast, right? Like, it's how it happens. But they were smart enough to say that, and now it's again gone to these other places. So the things that Disney is doing, yeah, we're seeing these new awesome billion-dollar roller coasters that are immersive and epic and other places, but guess what? They're still using some of that ingenuity that was developed, back in 2000 by Disney, or 2010 or 2012 by Disney. And that I think is the part of this new generation that gets underlooked quite a bit, is the little tiny intricate details like that.
Yeah, and the next generation is expanding on that technology. Like I said, the trackless ride going from a 8-minute ride to a 30-minute ride, right, is different. And then they turn around and do it, in overseas in Asia with Beauty and the Beast. Then they do it with Mickey's Runaway Railway, and they just keep getting better and better at it, right? With introducing that technology.
The Haunted Mansion version is that, and I believe that's in Tokyo, right? The Haunted Mansion that it uses the trackless ride. And what's so cool about that one, we weren't going to talk about the other overseas, but I can't help it with this one, is you can move to any room and the music follows you. And how cool is that? But that was all built off that trackless ride system.
Yeah. Mystic Manor, right, in Hong Kong debuted and became quickly the most popular attraction in the entire park.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was around this, that was certainly after Remy and before this. But, and it's kind of like, Indiana Jones is now coming to Animal Kingdom because it was the exact track and they know what they're working with. And they've improved that technology, just like Universal has improved the Kuka arm and made that smoother for the latest debut at Epic. And so,
I gotta be honest with you, I'm still afraid to ride it. I know everybody says it's smoother, but I'm still getting nauseous just thinking.
Oh no, I'm telling you, I've actually talked to someone who's been on it, and they said not only is it you don't have any of that experience at all with it. They said that they've perfected the most intense animation of the animatronics. It's like animatronic jump scares.
Yeah.
And just when you're escaping one, you turn and there's another one in your face.
Yeah.
And
what's funny is I'll always think of this when we talk about the Kuga arms. Is the first attraction I ever stood in a line with you was Forbidden Journey. And we were going through that attraction, and you had been on Forbidden Journey the day before, and you had also had a few tequilas the night before. And I remember going through the attraction, and you were just hanging out, and all of a sudden you're like, "All right, I'm out." And you ducked out the exit. And we're all like, "What the hell? Who is this guy? Like, old man doesn't want to ride the ride." And then, it was my first time doing the ride, so I got off, and I was like, now I know why you got out of line. I'll never forget that. And I have never ridden it since.
Well, the first time I did it sober. I wasn't going to do it after a few times. Absolutely not. But we went on Hagrid's, no problem. That's a different story.
Yeah.
I think to me it's because Disney so much in the late 60s, early 70s was all about audio and animatronics, and that was the technology that's cool. Every time I see an attraction with a new kind of a ride vehicle or an improved ride vehicle and combined with audio animatronics, to me, that's right. It's a lot more exciting than sitting in a little quiet dune buggy seeing, oh, that's cool,
Yeah.
right? When you combine the two things, then to me, you're hitting home runs.
Let's put this in the context of today's day and age. Rise of Resistance has over 5 million lines of code. 5 million lines of code. That is ridiculous. I mean, that is absolutely insane.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a long weekend for John.
Yeah, right. I'm not a code writer. No way. I can read code, but I do not enjoy writing code. It's been a bit since I've tried to write code. It's not my thing.
On our show, there would just be a random one finger salute that popped up.
That would be a secret code, not a written code. Look at so now we kind of we're getting closer to today, right? When you talk about Avengers Campus in Disneyland, when you talk about Guardians of the Galaxy, all of a sudden there's new IPs that the boys and girls in Imagineering can play with, and they start to throw the technology. Perfect subject matter to use high tech because of who they are, right? You want high tech around superheroes to mimic the movies or who you think they are if you're a fan. And so now you're incorporating some great things today and some promises of things to come.
Yeah. I think an underrated technological advancement was web slingers. You know, it's like the whole idea that you can literally use your own body parts in virtual reality to interact with an attraction is awesome, right? And of course, Disney being Disney, they're like, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and sell you something that can enhance it as well. Sure. But, you know, the fact that like all you have to do is flick your wrist and you're shooting a web at something, you know, is crazy. You know, I haven't seen anything close to that since then, you know, at least not in an attraction. So we come a long way from, you know, using a gun or a pop gun or something along those lines to destroy something. And now we're literally just using motion sensing technology. You know, even Guardians Mission Breakout, which was actually way before some of this, right? That was a little bit earlier than some of what we talked about. Just repurposing the attraction to the point where the technology was built to make you feel like you were jumping up, being tossed up, even though it was the same thing as Tower of Terror is being dropped down. And the way that they incorporated the music, the attraction, the lights, everything to go with that. I mean, there's so many examples that we can use, but yeah, that you got to have that when you're talking about superheroes, especially when Iron Man is Tony Stark is your main person, right there. You better have some technological advances going on.
John, where do you see this thing going?
That I hate to say, the sky's the limit with what technology and everything, AI, everything that's going on. I mean, I'm a little intrigued to see what's going to happen in the next 10 years with the next generation of rides and everything. I mean, you're gonna probably see stuff that has a lot more motion tracking, individual experiences within each ride, depending on what the ride is. Like I said, the sky's the limit. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think of what we're going to see, but you're probably going to see a lot more screens involved with different. Again, I said individual experiences, but individual experiences with stuff like no ride is going to be the same. The person next to you is going to have a totally different experience than you're having. I see that coming, and I see that being a big thing coming forward with a lot of these rides. Even roller coasters. I mean, what we're going to see, they're already pushing the limit to what roller coasters can do with physics and everything, but they're going to keep pushing them because people want that intensity. I mean, I know we're not talking about Epic, but even what they did with Epic with Skyfall Racers, they had to Starfall racers, they had to put in some brakes on certain hills coming off them because the G's were just too much for the body to handle. I mean, that tells you what these designers are doing. They're willing to push the limits. So if people want it, they're going to do it. Unfortunately, I mean, that's not a bad thing, but it's going to be intense.
I mean, we're talking about Disney stuff, but to build in what we're talking about, yeah, you got that with Starfall Racers. You've got the other rides that are being developed. How many rides are there now that have spinning carts that are kind of revolving around what they did on Galaxy Guardians of the Galaxy? There's 2 that I can think of.
One thing I'll say, I'll put my 2 cents into that. I see that as a novelty. I don't see us seeing that long. I mean, I see that as a trend right now, but I see it not lasting maybe more than 5 years until we get rid of that. Unfortunately, because it's got its place right now, and it's kind of cool because there are some coasters around the U.S. that use that are really cool. That kind of brought that technology, but I don't see us having that going that far.
So it's interesting. It brings up another aspect of technology, right? Is that just because you have it, how should you use it? Okay, in the 1970s, at many theme parks, Aero Development had a roller coaster called a mine train, and it looked like a mine train, and it was on those steel wooden tracks, and it did banks and turns and everything. But that was in the 70s, like when the theme park boom was in the mid 70s, right? Well, fast forward to the 80s, and Disney took it to an ultimate by putting it in a real mine with a real mountain and putting all around it. So the technology was there. Same is true of these spin carts, right? They're around. Busch Gardens had them for a long time. I've been on them before they've been around, before they put them in France for the Crush Coaster, and then here in Orlando there's a couple. They've been around, right? Just like looping coasters were around, but Disney put it in Rock and Roller Coaster, the first indoor one with a theme, right? So it's like the technology's been invented by someone, but it takes the Imagineers at these known bigger entities to say, okay, I wrote it, but what should this be? Should this really be?
Elevate, right? And that's what we were talking about earlier. Elevate. What are we going to do to elevate? And that's where places like Disney and Universal really come in. And, obviously Universal's putting billions and billions and billions of dollars into these attractions, and they are elevating a lot of different elements from a lot of different places. But to the point, right, I do think that the spinning stuff is probably not going to be as long-lived. I don't think we see 20 more attractions built that way. But what I do see is the theming and the immersion getting more and more immersive. I think that's really the key. We go back to Avatar, right? Flight of Passage, where we started with this conversation, and it's about immersion in the land. And you look at the most recent stuff. You look at the new Frankenstein, or the new Dark World. I haven't wrote it yet, so I won't remember what it's called until I write it.
Ryan is going a couple of times next month. We're going to get full reports on the podcast. Stay tuned.
Yeah,
and
totally will. So
Ryan will come back more informed and really know what he's talking about, unlike tonight.
But the idea is and somebody know this about me before you look at me crazy. I don't like to watch POV videos. I don't like to watch all that stuff because I feel like it ruins the experience for me for the first time going, right? So May 13th, I'll actually know what the hell I'm talking about. But but what I'm hearing though is that the animatronics are out of this world, right? And what I'm seeing from people is that like they're taking that immersion element and driving it further and further to maybe to a place where John said, where it's like you are getting a different experience every single time, and you are getting a different experience on the same ride. I don't know who's asking us if we can admit Rachel Ziegler is hot, but sure, whatever. Weird comments coming in on tonight's stream.
Did you tune into the right YouTube channel for this show?
Yeah, Dudes Dish Disney, not Dudes Dish whatever the hell you're talking about. So, but anyway, I think it's really cool to like see the immersive elements taking new shape, and I give credit to Disney for that. Disney really launched that. The storytelling aspect that we've always known for Disney that's something that I think is just going to become more and more prevalent. Just trolling. Later, dude.
Yeah, bye now.
But you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Look, this is great conversation. Thanks for putting this in. We'll get back to be continued after Ryan's trips to Orlando.
Yeah.
But let us know tomorrow on social media what you think about these next generation attractions and where potentially this is all going. And until it goes there and we get there, we'll see you later, dudes.
Later, dudes.
Later, dudes.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Dudes Dish Disney. Please check us out on social media. On Facebook at Dudes Dish Disney. On Instagram at Dudes Dish Disney. On X at Disney_Dish. Please check us out on YouTube. Like and subscribe at Dudes Dish Disney. Please visit our sponsor, Magic Vacations, at magicvacations.net. More than just a travel agency, Magic Vacations has over 60 Magic Vacation planners committed to bringing you white glove concierge service. Using a Magic Vacation planner allows you to spend more time making memories and less time worrying about the details. For all of your Disney, Universal, cruise, and global travel, go to magicvacations.net. Magic Vacations. Discover the magic of travel.